All right, we're rolling. What is this, August 2nd?
Pardon?
August 2nd, 2009. And Jacob Nolin and David Nolin are interviewing Gervais Nolin. We have some questions for you, sir. I'll go first, okay, Jacob?
Okay.
First question. What are your strongest memories about the Depression?
Would you say that again, please?
What are your strongest memories about the Depression?
Oh. Well, the Depression sort of missed us for by good fortune. My mother sold her parents' house, which she had inherited the year before the Depression started, so she had all that money. And my father had a good job that he never lost and brought home money every week to keep the family going. And other than the fact that you had to be careful about buying anything that amounted to much, in other words, if you wanted to buy a bike or something, you better buy it yourself. Or if I wanted a bike and a pair of long pants, and a bike. And I bought a pair of long pants for myself, and they turned out to be the kind that wouldn't hold a crease, and I was forever pressing them. And my mother's salesman finally sold my mother a 1940 Chevrolet car that I learned to drive on. But I don't remember much financial hurt from the Depression because we weren't very prosperous family anyway. They were both, my grandfather and my father worked in the factory. My grandfather worked in a forging and stamping plant, and my father worked at the shoe form company that made plastic shoe forms, that legs that they put in stores with a silk stocking on them, and they made those legs there. And my dad invented a way to do it using a tube instead of gluing two pieces together, and they treated him with a lot of respect. And then toward the end, they sent him to England because they bought up a fish hook plant. They were going to make fish hooks. So he went over there to learn how to make fish hooks. He came back and they started building an automatic machine that feeds wire in one side and fish hooks dump it out the other. They couldn't get it regulated, and he had to go back to Connecticut where they were building the machine on the Pennsylvania Railroad that went to Schenectady and then over to Connecticut. And the train had a wreck on the way home, and he was crushed to death in the train wreck, and the roof came down on him while he was in his bunk. But
How old were you?
Huh?
How old were you?
15, I think. We got over it. My mother got a big inheritance, which was all the money my father was supposed to earn if he'd lived to be a certain age. So she wound up a well-off woman. And everybody knew it, and everybody was down trying to sell her something. She finally bought that car because I wanted it, and I learned to drive it pretty much by myself. All together, it wasn't a bad deal, for us anyway. Sort of like what we're having right now. There's a depression going on all around us with everybody losing their jobs. And I'm not noticing at all. I have plenty of money. The only thing I'm worried about is a big wave of inflation or some scheme to destroy the value of what I've got.
Jacob, you ask one.
All right. What is the biggest difference about the world since you were a kid?
Oh, it's altogether different. When I was a kid, there were not very many people here, and the streets were spotted with vacant lots as you walk up the street. I'd say 1/3 of the street was vacant, ready to put houses on, but they quit the construction because of the Depression. And trucks had chain drive, and they had solid rubber tires on the front, and they were big and ugly. Our street had a trolley car, and it was a humpback street, so a lot of the water ran down to the edges in a rainstorm. They finally tore that out and put in a regular road about 1935. And see if I can gather my thoughts here. Well, almost nobody had a car. And those that had them would drive them only on Sunday. And they would put them up on blocks in the wintertime. They wouldn't drive them in the winter. They didn't have a good way to have antifreeze. So they just drain the antifreeze and put them on blocks and wait for spring. Most people, many people. People would take Sunday afternoon drives in them, though, when they were running. Otherwise, they didn't use them much. Not much car traffic in the street. It was all trolley car. They eventually took out the trolley cars when they built the street, and of course they took up the trucks when they did that and put in a bus line which stopped right in front of our house.
You remember horses?
Yeah, I can remember a lot of horses, and they would poop in the streets when they went by, and the women around would rush out with their little shovels to get the manure to use it for fertilizer. Horses gradually died out and became a thing of the past. Yeah, everything, all sorts of stuff was by horse. They had a guy come around selling vegetables out of a horse-drawn wagon, and you'd hear him coming, ringing his bell. And you can run out and buy your vegetables from him, right off the farm.
Okay. How did you become a fighter pilot?
Well, you got me that book. Well, I'll start at the beginning. My dad was really enthusiastic about reading about World War I airplane pilots. And he'd buy magazines and bring them home and I'd read all these imaginary stories about great fighter pilots. And man, I thought that was probably the greatest thing you could do. Well, Ed Knight finally bought that book, I Wanted Wings, and I read it, and that told me how to get in the cadets and what you had to go through to pass it. And just a few months after I got out of high school, the war started. And I didn't sign up right away because what's the point? But then eventually they also put in the draft, so that put a little pressure on you to join up because you got way more privileges if you weren't drafted. At any rate, around December of 1942, I went over to Syracuse and signed up in the to try to get in the cadets by taking our test. Well, I didn't weigh enough. I only weighed 116 pounds, and I would go in there and I'd get on the scale, and the old sergeant said, "You didn't make it." So I'd go in and I'd drink more water, and I'd get back on that scale. Wouldn't change it much at all. I just kept drinking water until I was flushed. And he finally said, "Okay, you're in." And I got in without weighing enough. Ed and I went down to New York City to look it over because we'd gotten word we were going to get called in, to look it over before we had to leave. So we went down to New York City and went up in the Empire State Building and went out to the Statue of Liberty and looked at Broadway and went to a show called I forget the name of it. But it was an interesting show in Broadway. And that was a thing to do in those days. New York was kind of a big thing back east for entertainment.
So you had to go to basic training?
Oh, yeah. Well, then in February they called us in, and we went over to Syracuse Armory, and they immediately shipped us to Atlantic City, where we had basic training. I think it lasted about a month. But they have you out doing jogging and sit-ups and all sorts of physical exercise. We lived in the hotels in Atlantic City, which they had taken from the owners and used them as an army base. Thousands of soldiers in Atlantic City along the boardwalk. But when we got out of there, they shipped me to Syracuse. And they shipped Ed Knight to someplace in Pennsylvania. And I never got to see any more of him during the war. Because he was in the central, I was in the central division, and he was in the eastern division. So we had pretty much different experiences. Now, the experience was pre-flight. You had to go and pass 1 million tests to prove that you were okay. And if you passed pre-flight, they would send you to what do they call it? Primary. And there you just took mainly like going to school, a lot of courses. And if you passed all that successfully, no, that first was, the one I just called primary was really I think it was called basic training, where you took all the courses. And if you passed all that, you got sent to primary. Well, when it came time for me to go to primary, there were no schools open for us. We went in big bunches. And so we had an extra month there in the name of that town, San Antonio. Well, we finally got into primary and started flying, and I never had any trouble flying at all because I had learned to fly on my own at Auburn, using money that I'd earned working at my cousin's factory to make the payments to learn how to fly. And most of the troubles I had learning how to fly were eliminated at that place were eliminated there at the Auburn Airport, so I had no problems at all learning to fly in primary school. In basic school, you just went through the same routine. Each of these about 3 months.
Got to take a short break.
Yeah.
Talking about basic training.
Went to basic training, and it was about the same as primary, except you were flying a lot bigger airplane and you didn't have to solo. Well, you had to solo, but they didn't call it that. That means fly it alone. Well, then we went to advanced training where they taught you formation flying and cross-country flying.
What kind of plane?
AT-6. Nice big plane, plenty of power, made a lot of noise. Easy to fly, too. Well, I finally graduated, and they gave the dollar to the first guy to salute me. Well, I went to advance at Alo Field in Texas, which was by Victoria. But it's not there anymore. ALOE. And I was out. And I got shipped to what do they call that? Replacement Training Detachment in Baton Rouge. You want me to keep going? From there I got shipped to the name of that airfield way out in the desert.
Edwards?
Hmm?
Edwards?
No,
Oh.
it's way up north where the atomic bombers were practicing.
Oh.
Anyway, we moved in there and I checked out in the P-47 But it wasn't long before these bombers came in, and we were kicked out, and we went rather abruptly down to my memory's flagging a little.
Well, anyway, so where did you, how did you get transferred overseas?
Well, I finally finished this training up in northern Texas, and I went back to Baton Rouge. But after I got out of that course, I put a request in to be put into P-51s because they gave me this interview, and I know P-51 was a way better plane than a P-47 and a lot safer. So off I went to, well, when I left Baton Rouge, I was mighty surprised to see the train cross the Mississippi going west. I figured it would go to the European war. That thing aiming at me? I think it was aiming over my head. I would have to see the back. At any rate, I got sent to the Pacific instead of the European theater. And there, they put me in a P-38 squadron. And there's P-38 for all over everywhere. And I wasn't a two-engine pilot, so I said, this is strange that I'm assigned to fly in a two-engine airplane, and all my training was in one engine. But they said, no, you don't have to learn how to fly the P-38. You can go as a P-51 pilot. And there I was, and they told me these would be the longest missions in history, running 7 to 8 hours. And it had never been done before to that extent, regularly. So I just hung with them, and the next thing you know, they put me on a ship and send me to the Pacific, and I go to 2 or 3 different islands, and then finally stop at Guam, I think, on a ship. And then after a long wait there, we moved up to Iwo Jima, and I got off the ship on one of those rope ladders down the side, wearing an iron hat, into the big landing craft. Well, the big landing craft put us all ashore, and we all went up to the base camp, which was on a dry black sand beach, all tents. And I got assigned to go down in a truck to the beach and pick up the luggage, which is a huge pile on the beach. So about 2 guys in a truck and myself went down there, and we loaded that stuff up on that truck. And on the way back, the driver got nervous because he could hear all kinds of gunfire over by our camp. So he stopped the truck, and we got out, and we, in the dark, and looked out to see if we could see anything, and we couldn't see a thing. We waited there until it calmed down. And then we drove up to the camp, and it had been destroyed while we were gone. Japanese suicide people had attacked it and got themselves all killed. I can remember looking down into one huge shell hole, and there were about 20 Jap soldiers in a heap down there. One of our guys knew they were down there, and he crept up to the edge of the hole and threw in hand grenades and killed them all. But that was the extent of my real battle experience on Iwo Jima, even though we were very careful about where we went and what we did, especially at night. I slept in a hole for about 2 weeks. And little by little, we started living in the revetments that we learned how to build from the Marines, which was a square lined with sandbags with a tent over it, so you couldn't throw hand grenades in there. And it was about 3 or 4 hand grenades deep, and maybe 2 hand grenades above the ground. Not hand grenades, damn it. Sandbags. 3 sandbags under the ground, and maybe 4. And 2 sandbags above the ground. And we took the dirt in the middle and threw it out on all 4 sides. And we were actually sleeping below ground level. And from there we went on mission. And they turned out to be, some of them pretty tough. 3 of them pretty near got me. One, we went up there and somebody who didn't have much sense turned a whole group into a side of a cold front. And people couldn't see each other in formation, and a lot of guys didn't have enough experience at instruments to fly formation through a rough, rainy, icy cloud like that. And we lost 26 planes in about 2 minutes. Well, I made it through that one because I didn't even have my instruments uncaged. Your instruments are usually caged unless you need them, because it's hard on them to do maneuvers with the instruments caged. Uncaged. And the next tough one was the carburetor on the P-51 had a way of returning some fuel to the back tank, but it was only a trifle, like a couple of gallons an hour. And they told us about it. Well, on one mission I'm coming home, and the gas seems to disappear awful fast. First, the back tank ran out of gas altogether up over Japan. We used to just run until they were dry. And finally, one outside tank was empty, and the other outside tank, they had a big inside tank. That one finally ran out of gas, and I was switching back and forth, and finally that one ran out of gas. And I'm gliding down what I think is no gas. And I'm calling the Air Sea Rescue, and they're not giving me any answer. Finally, my leader comes back and joins me, and he wants me to speed up because I'm going on the maximum mileage I could get out of the airplane. Because I had, I imagine the gas tank back there was square and it had corners in it, and it quit within it when I was in the bank, and I visualized gasoline in those corners, so I switched to the back tank and picked right up, and away we went. But I was trying to conserve that little bit, and it lasted. Finally, my element leader came back and found me. And I finally looked back there at that back tank, and it was full. That damn carburetor has been dumping gas out of these things into the back tank, and apparently it was just overflowing the back tank out into the air. That was a scary ride. Then another time we were coming home, they told us he had been locked in since we left, and we'd better go to Okinawa. By the time they told us that, you couldn't go to Okinawa, it was too far. So we decided to come home. About the time we got to Iwo Jima, the weather cleared, and all the planes went down there and landed everywhere they could, even on the taxi strips. But when I went to land, they told me my tail wheel was not down, which was my fault. Should have pushed the handle all the way down, and I left a little space there. So I went around, I tried sinking down into the clouds. They were only over the island, and only over the middle of it, not over the edges. Tried sinking in there and see if I could find that runway. Well, I took a couple of tries at that, and I never did see the runway. Even though I got down to 200 feet before I changed my mind, went around. I finally made a third let down, and I see a runway in the fog. The end of it, well, I didn't know it was the end of it. I see a runway, and I apparently could detect the direction. So I chopped the throttle and landed on it. And suddenly there I am, coasting along in a blinding fog. Can't see where I'm going. At 90 miles an hour, not being able to know whether it was ahead of me or not. So I put it on the brakes and got it stopped. And it was so cloudy that I couldn't even see my wingtips. But I could see a light back over my right shoulder. So I shut off the engine and got out and walked over to this light. Came to the light was over a door, and I opened it, and everybody sprang to attention. And I asked them if they'd come and help me shove my airplane off the runway. And they flew out there, and we had that done in a minute. And it turned out I was on the wrong runway. I was on one of the other group's runway, which ran parallel to ours. At any rate, somebody came and got me, and I was out of that one. So out of my 10 missions, that was 3 of the rotten ones, where I pretty near lost my life. I could have very easily. So that's about it.
How about, did you encounter Japanese airplanes?
Pardon?
Did you encounter Japanese airplanes?
I counted 6 Japanese airplanes that were ready to fight. And in my opinion, I shot down 2 of them out of the 6. But the government only gave me a forget the name of it, they called it,
Credit?
possible on it. It wasn't full. And then another inspector came along and took it all away from me. Because for some reason my gun camera didn't come up with a decent picture.
They used your movies though, didn't they? And
Pardon?
you'd see your movies in later on, didn't you? You'd see movies from your plane.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whenever you pulled the trigger, the camera turned on.
Okay. Well, let's go away there, Jacob.
All right. What do you think of Barack Obama?
Pardon?
What do you think of Obama?
The president?
Yeah.
He seems like a good president to me because he's spreading peace and repairing America's good name around the world, which, of course, Bush had really destroyed. So I don't know whether he's doing right or wrong or what particles of what he's doing are right or wrong. But people do trust the United States a little more than they did.
Okay. What are you most proud of?
What?
What are you most proud of?
That I made it up to Lieutenant Colonel in the reserve. When I got back from overseas, I knew I couldn't make a good living on the outside because I'm not trained for anything. So to dodge that, I said, I'd like to stay in. Would you accept me? And they said, yes, you can stay in, but you have to sign up for 3 years. I said, fine, that'll be good. So I didn't get out when I got back. I stayed in the Army an extra year. I finally wound up here at Wright Pat in an air show, which isn't a good thing to be in if you want to stay in. At any rate, they canceled the air show, but they put me in the ground show, which still exists. They call it the orientation group. And any rate, about the time I got out of the Army, Parky and I got married. You don't see the pictures here. They're about me getting married in my military suit. Then we moved to Royal Street because it was cheaper to put your money in your own house than it was to spend your time and money on a rental house.
Okay, Jacob.
And then we moved to
Whoop. Sorry.
Archer Drive because we needed more bedrooms. We needed one for you and we needed one for Grandma. No, Grandma wasn't there then. We needed a garage for our new our new car, our old Greenie. So we wound up with enough bedrooms. Of course, I had to reconvert the interior of that house before I could get 4 bedrooms out of it. Well, you and Bob slept upstairs. Finally. I better go to the bathroom.
Okay, now we're going to do the next question.
Okay. What is your most significant memory about World War II?
Coasting down that runway in the fog, not being able to see where I was going at 90 miles an hour. That was scary. Fortunately, it only lasted a few seconds.
Okay, what was your favorite vacation?
I took a lot of them. The best thing for that was that travel trailer, and we went everywhere in it. We covered the whole United States. And it went to all the good places. Don't think we missed much of the United States at all when we had it. And I finally sold it for more than I paid for it. After all that running around. When I bought it, it had no heater in it. And we made a trip to Florida. Found out how cold it was in there. After we got home, I went down to Dayton and had a furnace put in it. That was pretty adequate. And finally, I put it up for sale. Some guy over here in South Fairborn had a brother-in-law living with him, and he wanted him out of the house. So they bought that trailer, so parked alongside the house, and that's where the brother-in-law lived. And that's how I got rid of it.
Where'd we go on that trip?
Well, we made 2 trips completely around the United States. A big circle that went all the way around near the border, and a smaller circle inside that. And then we went on another big circle up into Canada and down through New York State and back home. You remember that one, I'm sure, because you had a friend up there. What was his name? Maybe your Canadian buddy?
Oh, yeah. Richie or something? Yeah.
Then we made any number of them down to Florida and back. One big one, we went all the way down to Florida, across to the Gulf, along the Gulf to somewhere near New Orleans, and then north.
I think that's our trip.
That's one trip around the United States.
Okay, in case you need that there. Okay.
How about that trip where we flew the 8-1 Sierra? Was that a good trip?
Yeah, that was a nice trip. Proved I could still fly an airplane and I could still navigate.
Okay, Jacob, your turn.
Okay. What was your favorite year?
The year I got married to Parker,
Good answer.
Have you gone through all yours yet?
If you could do something different, what would it be?
I think for me, everything fell into place pretty much by accident. Now, I got this house because I got a book out of the library that explained how you can make a bundle of money buying and renting property. So I tried that on Royal Street. I rented that, and I found out that I could make as much money off the Royal Street value in a money market fund as I could renting. So I gave up on renting and finally decided to move in. It also explained how money put in the house would increase. So I said to myself, I'm going to buy the biggest house I can get my hands on. For my mother and my son to live in. So we got a bedroom here for Mom, for Wob, for Dave, and for ourselves. And a nice place for keeping 2 cars. Good basement for fiddling on things.
You got any more there, Jacob?
Last one for me. Which president do you admire the most?
Franklin D. Roosevelt.
Why?
Hmm?
Why?
Well, he's a well, prior to him, the rich had everything and we had this damn depression where the poor had nothing. And he made some drastic changes in the way life was lived in the United States, like the minimum wage and the legality of unions. All things that made ordinary people live better, which is basically a democratic behavior, which the Republicans hate, because the money that makes everybody live better comes out of their pocket. So I can understand why they're upset.
Did I leave a little knife in here? Nope. Okay.
Manufacturing has been shot in the United States. And making a living in Frigidaire or Chrysler or any other of those big centralized manufacturing places won't be available. So things like medical will be very contested for. People like nurses and doctors. But I think it's going to be, unless you become a person that works for the government, it's going to be hard to make a good living around here. But the government hires people pretty steady. There's a wall board over in the base that shows all the government jobs that are available. And if you've got the degree in the right place, you're in for the rest of your life.
Any advice for Jacob over there?
Well, he's got his mindset on becoming an artist. And I think an artist is a hard way to make a living. It's an easy way to get a degree, but a tough way to make a living. If he does try for an artist, he ought to make sure that the degree he gets is also useful for the government in some way. And I don't think they have a field number for an artist. Probably won't be as easy for Jacob as it was for us. I hope that's not true, though. I hope you'd look into the best job you ever wanted. Takes a certain amount of dumb luck. How many more years you got in grade school? I mean in high school?
2.
Huh?
2.
Every day take you over to the employment place here on Patterson Field and look at the walls for all the kind of jobs they are looking for. This is the only place around here that's good for jobs because all the people are moving in from all these places that are being closed down. So housing around here is much better than it is anywhere else too. Houses haven't fallen so much.